The man wanted to buy a box lunch, but when he was checking out he realized that all his savings added up to 9 pence short. So he offers to sing for the boss in exchange for a discount. The boss refused him. He would rather pour the food into the sink than give it to the homeless man. He had no choice but to go out into the street and go through the garbage cans to find food. And this kind of day of grabbing food with mice has also become the man's daily life. The man's name is James, is a vagrant who sells songs for a living. Unlike the other tramps, James is not homeless. His father lives nearby and often even meets him, but each time his father pretends not to know him as a son. The father didn't dislike him singing on the street like a beggar, but because 2 years ago, James became addicted to drugs. In order not to affect the other children in the family, the stronger stepmother threw him out of the house. Although these years, James has been trying to get rid of drug addiction. But in his stepmother's mind, he was still the same worthless junkie. His father would sometimes give him some pocket money out of guilt, but it was only enough for him to live on for a few days. On this day, James was roaming the streets of the city as usual. When he passed a car, he was suddenly called out. It turned out that it was a former friend. He invited James to spend the night in this unlocked car and introduced him to a new type of contraband. James had no intention of touching these things again, but with the constant encouragement of his friend, he finally failed to resist the temptation. The next day, the careless car owner came back. His friend found out that something was wrong and ran away, while James passed out in the car because he had overdosed. By the time he woke up again, he was in the hospital. Looking at the disappointed drug rehab doctor, he felt very guilty. He kept apologizing for his out-of-control behavior last night, but luckily the kind doctor didn't give up on him. She represcribed James sedative medication and through her connections, applied for an emergency housing unit for him. Because she saw in James' eyes the desperation of being forced by life, and his determination to live again. The moment he moved into the emergency housing, James was so excited that he couldn't speak. He hadn't felt at home for a long time. He assured the doctor that he would not let her down again this time. The first night he moved into his new home, he was happy to take a hot bath. But then, there was a noise outside the house. James was so scared that he thought there was a burglar. When he opened the door, he found that it was an orange cat. It had slipped in through the window and was eating his cereal. Looking at the poor little cat, James poured some milk for it. After the kitten had eaten its fill, he told it to hurry home. But the kitten did not want to go, but into his room. The next morning, James took the kitten to look for its owner, who thought it was bred by a neighbor. But after asking around, the neighbors all said they had never seen the cat before. No way, he could only put the cat back on the grass. The current situation, he cannot even take care of himself, simply cannot afford to adopt a stray cat. He named the cat Bob and hoped it would fend for itself in the days to come. But to his surprise, when he returned to his apartment at night, Bob appeared at the door again, and was injured. James rushed to pick him up and seek help. A neighbor, Betty, who works at an animal welfare agency, looked at Bob's wounds and suggested that James take it to the hospital for a checkup. After the doctor's surgery, Bob was finally out of danger. But at the checkout, James was told that the kitten would need a bottle of antibiotics to make a full recovery. £22, which is his living expenses for the next week. The cashier saw James' dilemma and told him he could do without it, and that the treatment was free. In the end, for the sake of Bob's health, James bought the expensive bottle of antibiotics. Considering Bob's health condition, James decided to adopt him temporarily. He soon discovered that this cat seemed different from other cats. Cats are generally aloof and don't like places with lots of people. Bob, on the contrary, not only followed James all the way to the bus stop in order to stay with his master. After being chased away by James, it would also jump on the bus alone and chase James sent back into his arms. Looking at this clingy kitten, James cannot do anything about it. In order not to delay his singing money, he could only carry Bob on his back. I did not expect the combination of this man and cat just appeared, attracted the attention of the public. People have stopped, some came up to take pictures, some people came to tease the cat, everyone has never seen such a clingy cat. This also makes James's singing scene become very lively. With more people watching, James naturally received more rewards. After one show, his income was several times more than before. He high-fived Bob excitedly and bought a large amount of canned food for him. In the following days, Bob did not let him down either. Whenever James performed, he sat on the guitar and stared at the passers-by with his cute cat face, making the passers-by embarrassed not to pay. As more and more passers-by gathered around, one spectator came to the crowd with a dog in his hand. The dog peed on James' backpack in front of him, and the dog owner didn't stop it. The spectators on the sidelines could not stand it and they came out to fight for James. Unexpectedly, it triggered a collective conflict. Although James is also the victim of this conflict, but the police consider that the conflict is because of him, but ultimately restricted him for 6 months, no longer allowed to sell songs on the street. In this way, his only source of income was cut off. In order to make ends meet, James had to find a new job selling newspapers. I didn't expect this man and cat combination, selling newspapers. Business is also very hot. People came up to buy newspapers in order to take pictures with them. And this gimmick also succeeded in attracting the attention of a local reporter. He reported the story of James selling newspapers. Soon, this man and cat combination became a local internet sensation, and more people came to visit. This day, a woman looked at James's cat. She lamented that James' life is not easy. The kitten followed him around and did not have a warm home. She was willing to adopt the kitten and offered to pay for it. James tells her that it has nothing to do with money, and he introduces the woman to his friendship with Bob. But the woman doesn't listen. She thinks it's James' way of raising the price. She kept pushing James to make an offer. This money-buy-everything attitude made James very angry. He questioned the woman, "How much is your child worth and I'll exchange it with you?" When this was said, the woman also became angry and the two started an argument. Bob was shocked by the scene and it jumped to the ground. At this moment a dog appeared in the crowd and chased after the cat after seeing it. Bob was frightened and ran around. James searched almost all corners of the city, and still found no trace of Bob. Soon, 3 days had passed, and he began to despair, and a bad feeling began to appear in his mind. He looked into the distance, and outside the door the vendors were again peddling contraband drugs. Alone and helpless, he once again had a bad thought. He came to the vendor, "Have you seen my cat?" "Yes." Bob once again pulled him back from the brink. He returns home, disoriented, to find that Bob has returned on his own. He hugged Bob with excitement, and this lost and found experience made him understand his responsibility. He wanted to get rid of his dependence on drugs, to control his emotions and to be a clean cat owner. He told his doctor about his idea, and she was very supportive of his decision. But she also reminded James that the process of getting rid of his dependence on drugs would take at least a week. The pain of an addiction is 100 times worse than a bad case of the flu, and it would be difficult for him to keep it up on his own. She suggested that James find someone to stay with him in recovery. But James said it was enough to have Bob with him. Soon, the week-long program began. At first James distracted himself by playing the piano and singing. Soon, he realized it was useless. The addiction kicked in and every cell in his body began to tremble. He became restless and irritable, like a trapped beast, frantically tearing at everything around him. As time progressed, his body's senses became confused. He was hot and cold, shivering and sweating. Every 5 seconds, he had to turn over, otherwise his whole body was like being struck by lightning. Tossing and turning, another all-nighter. Bob was like a patron saint, always by his side, giving him the courage and motivation to persevere. Soon, the time came to the 8th day, with the first rays of sunlight outside the window shone on his body. James felt more refreshed and energized than ever before. He knew that this time he had finally succeeded. The first thing he did was to find his father and tell him that he had been successfully rehabilitated. His father was both surprised and pleased, and he reached into his pocket. James thought he was going to take out his change again to get rid of himself, and hastily explained that he now had a job and did not need relief. But this time his father pulled out this, a picture of James as a child. He told James that he had never given up on him. It was just the interference of his current wife that made him not know how to handle the relationship. He apologized to James, saying that he was not a qualified father and that he was proud to have him as a son. With news media coverage, James and Bob's touching story became a household name, and a publisher approached them to collaborate on a book about this touching and inspiring experience. In 2012, the book was a huge hit upon publication. At the book signing, countless fans came to see Bob's real face. The man holding the book and asking for an autograph is the real protagonist of the story. And this cute cat in the film is the real Bob. This is a film based on a true story. The real James, because of the royalties from the book, bought his own house, have their own family.